All right, we are back here talking college basketball, catching up on what's been a very fun season so far. Joining me today, as we did throughout March, as we did last month, to preview the season, Troy Mauriello, the Seeing Red podcast is back. Troy, how are you?
I'm doing well, Mike. Happy to be here again.
I'm happy here too, and this is a lot of fun. This season, I think, has been so enjoyable. The quality of basketball is so great. What do you think of what we've seen over the first month of the action?
Yeah, you're right. There's been a couple teams that have really shined, and I'm sure that we'll get to them in a second. That have kind of been unexpected. Yeah, we've had a lot of high quality, high level games that are. I'm sure we'll talk about how they're not being played at really the best windows of time, but some high level games, and it's great to have the crowds back, and it's great to have fans back in the building, and not really many games. I know that there have been some games postponed, but not a ton of postponements or having to worry about postponements. So yeah, it's good to kind of have everything back to pre-pandemic levels and the crazy environments that we've seen that make college basketball what it is. So it's been good to definitely get the season off to a good start so far.
It has. I mean, apart from, I think Washington's men's teams had an issue with the COVID. I know the Iona women's teams had an issue with the COVID, but apart from those two, really haven't had many COVID issues. And the quality of play, there's so many players being back off experienced rosters. These games have been epic. We've had some like March level action in November, which you don't usually get.
Yeah, exactly. And like you mentioned, a lot of players coming back. I think that was one thing about the NIL deals that was a really one of the biggest positives of that is you're seeing a lot of guys that maybe would not have been lottery picks in the NBA that probably would have gone on to play either overseas or in the G League. They elect to come back to school. And I think that just leads to, a higher level of competition at this time of year when you have guys that are in their, third and fourth year in college, as opposed to, coming in and playing their first collegiate games or, playing with a new team. When you have that kind of carryover from year to year, yeah, it's going to lead to higher level games in November and December. And that's what we've seen so far.
Yeah, let's do some big picture stuff here. Let's start off with Gonzaga, who was the preseason number one. They looked dominant early on. They dismantled Texas. They blew out UCLA in Vegas, but the wheels have come off a little bit the last couple of weeks. They lose to Duke out in Vegas, the third game they play out there, actually. They struggle at home against Tarleton, which is like a very low major program they got a bye game for. And then Alabama shoots them out of the gym in the first half. Gonzaga comes back, falls short, loses. Now they've lost two of their past three games. So what do you think is wrong with Gonzaga right now?
Yeah, I'm not ready to press the panic button just yet for Gonzaga. They lost a tough game to Duke. Duke was number one as of last week. Duke's going to be a top five, top 10 team all season long. That was a close game, like you mentioned. That was an NCAA tournament level game. The game against Tarleton, I think you just throw it out the window. It's sandwiched in between two really important big games for them. So that's obviously a big letdown spot. And then, like you mentioned, the game against Alabama, Alabama couldn't miss in the first half. It felt like in that game, and obviously Gonzaga tried to make the comeback, but wasn't able to do so. It's a team that they have some new pieces. They have some guys trying to fit in. Obviously, Holmgren is the big new guy trying to come in, but I don't think that Gonzaga was ever going to go undefeated this year. I think it was unrealistic to expect them to win 30 games in a row or win their first 30 games of this season like we saw last year. They obviously beefed up their non-conference schedule to, kind of mitigate the fact that they don't play in a great conference. So, they're playing a lot of tough teams. They're going to lose a couple of those games. They still do have, I believe, one or two big non-conference games remaining. I think they play Texas Tech in a couple of weeks. So they have an opportunity to kind of right the ship before conference play. I'm not freaking out about it. Gonzaga, I still think that they're, the best team in the country. I still think that they're one of, if not the favorite to win the national title. It's just going to take some time, and it was unrealistic to expect them to go out and be a 29-1 team or whatever going into March Madness. So not ready to totally freak out on them just yet.
Yeah, I did check. I'm checking out the schedule right now. They do have that Texas Tech game coming up on Saturday the 18th on neutral floor. They have Washington coming in this weekend off their COVID issues. That should be a good bounce back spot for Gonzaga here. I'm not worried about them long term. The thing that concerns me with them is sort of like, did they peak too early? Whereas they just put on these dominant performances against Texas, against UCLA, and they were blowing all the non-conference teams they play out of the water. And now they're a bigger target in the backs, and you get big efforts. The WCC is pretty strong this year because you got a couple, I think in the last College Insider mid-major poll, the top four teams in it were all from that conference.
Yeah, and that could also, kind of work to their favor if the conference is maybe a little bit stronger. BYU is going to be really good. I think San Francisco is also unbeaten. St. Mary's is always a good program. So maybe they will get maybe a little bit more tested in that conference than they normally would. So maybe that could also be a positive for them. But yeah, I mean, their whole season is always, determined really in the first couple of weeks of March. So, to really have any sort of broad statements about Gonzaga in December, it's tough right now.
It is tough right now. Let's go on to the new number one in this week's poll. Purdue up top for the first time in program history. It's amazing considering how long they've been great at basketball. And you want to talk about them last month. They were a team we like. You said Final Four potential. I was right there with you. Like, I think it's nice for us to see it. The Boilermakers making us look pretty good so far.
Yeah. They just got so much depth with Jaden Ivey, Zach Edey, Trevion Williams coming off the bench, who I thought was going to be one of the best players in the conference. They just have so much depth. They've been so impressive so far this season. Yeah, they're making us look smart right now. I think that they're a Final Four caliber team. I think that this is the year that they finally kind of break through and reach that Final Four. And yeah, they've really, really been impressive. They played a couple of high level games. That game against Villanova a couple of weeks ago was really, really fun to watch. And yeah, I mean, as of right now, obviously it's December. We're still 3 months away from the tournament. But when you're talking about a short list of teams that can, have that Final Four potential and be on the road to the Final Four, I think Purdue has to, start and end that list.
Yeah, I love this too. I love what they did in the Big Ten AC Challenge, where they dominated Florida State. They made a statement where they beat Villanova in the Hall of Fame tip-off, that event we loved in the preseason. And the thing impressing most of them was that they had a tough game with Iowa right after that game, the first conference game of the year. They struggled early, found a way to win that game. Stuff like that makes you take them serious as a title contender.
Yeah, exactly. And the Big Ten is going to be such a battle. There's so many good teams in the Big Ten. I know that, some people like to rag on the Big Ten, and I rag on the Big Ten a little bit as well. But, there are so many talented teams in the Big Ten. When you look at Purdue, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio State, Minnesota's unbeaten, Wisconsin, Michigan isn't even playing well right now. There's so many solid teams in the Big Ten. It's going to be a battle. So they're going to certainly be battle tested for sure. They're going to pick up some losses at some point, playing in that conference. But yeah, right now, I have to say Purdue is my personal favorite to win the national title.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of the Big Ten, let's go to the Big Ten AC Challenge, which happened last week. Is the big non-conference event I look forward to every year because you get a bunch of premier teams playing each other. And the Big Ten won this year. They picked up 8 wins in 14 contests. They were up 6-2 early. The last game featured a bunch of like the dregs of the Big Ten getting in the mix here, which didn't help their cause. But I think there was some interesting stuff to take out of this event. What is your big takeaway from this ACC Big Ten Challenge?
Yeah, I have two. The first one, Ohio State taking down Duke. That was a really impressive win for the Buckeyes. That entire second half, it really felt like, Ohio State was going to kind of keep getting close, and, not be able to kind of to pull into the lead and kind of pull away in that game. They really shut Duke down in the last couple of minutes of that game. They played a really solid, final 10 minutes of that game. Really impressive win for them. I thought EJ Liddell was fantastic in that game. So, I'm very impressed with Ohio State taking down Duke, a young Duke team, on the road, tough game for them. But that Ohio State really, really impressed me. And then, the following night, Michigan, who kind of looks like a mess right now. They obviously got a win over the weekend, but getting blown out in the second half by North Carolina. North Carolina really flexed their muscle. I think outscored them by like almost 20 points in the second half of that game. So, Michigan's got some stuff to work on for sure. They've already dropped a couple of games this season, but North Carolina was really, really impressive. And, I think North Carolina unranked right now, or was unranked at the time, could, kind of fly a little bit under the radar this season, but I think that they got a really talented team as well. So those are my two big takeaways in the two big games. But there were some incredible games in that entire challenge over the 2 days that it was.
Yeah, I think the best one by far is the double overtime game between Syracuse and Indiana. That was fantastic. I love that game. I think the big takeaway for me is obviously the size we mentioned with Purdue's domination is sort of the teams behind the teams at the top of the AC did not do very well. The ones projected to do well. I mean, Florida State gets blown out. Virginia loses a game to Iowa, which is a bad loss, and Iowa was not expected to do much heading into this season. And Duke mentioned 13-point lead at halftime against Ohio State and gets that score 41-23 after the break to lose by 5. That's not good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The ACC has been a real letdown so far this season. Like you mentioned, Florida State. I thought Florida State was going to be a really good team this year. They've really struggled. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of time for the ACC, but I think as of right now, they only have one or two ranked teams in their entire conference. So, there's time for the ACC to pick it up, but that was certainly not an impressive couple of days for them against the Big Ten.
No, and luckily those were all played at reasonable times, which is not something we could say with some of the early season showcase games, because we had a lot of great games in early November. We had UCLA taking on Villanova out in the West Coast. We had Gonzaga hosting Texas, Gonzaga, UCLA, Duke, Gonzaga. All those games had one thing in common. They started after 10 o'clock on the East Coast. UCLA Villanova was the worst. Started 11:30 p.m., which, I mean, if you're a Villanova fan, that was brutal to have to stay up and watch that game and then them lose in overtime. Duke, the Texas Gonzaga game was 10:30. UCLA Gonzaga was 10 o'clock on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and then Duke and Duke Gonzaga was that 10:30 on the Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, either a Saturday or a Friday night.
It was Friday.
Yeah, I mean, it might have been a Friday, but I don't fully understand it. I mean, all the games were on the West Coast, so I guess you kind of give them a pass for that. But yeah, it's like you said, people complain about how no one watches, or no one really watches college basketball on a national level until March, really. Well, maybe that's a reason why. You have all these matchups, like you mentioned, Gonzaga, UCLA, Gonzaga, Duke, Villanova, UCLA, like these are Gonzaga, Texas. These are all big matchups between top 5, top 10 teams. And you're playing them when, a majority of the East and even Central time zone is already in bed going to, or, winding down their night. So it's tough to do that. You're not going to grow the game that way. I will say, I think that college basketball in November and even into December, it's kind of, a little bit of a niche sport. You're not going to get the mega TV ratings that you will in March or, for the NCAA tournament, because, right now people are in football mode. They're watching the NFL, they're watching college football more than college basketball. So I don't think that these games would do monster ratings if they were, played at 7 or 8 o'clock, but at the same time, you're not really doing yourself any favors with the ratings when you start them. Like I mentioned, when, a majority of the country is, going to be falling asleep. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation for them.
Yeah, I think for me, the problem, is just that they're sort of at the mercy of the broadcasters here, which I don't think they're doing a good enough job standing up for themselves, because ESPN, I think, had almost at every one of those games, I think, except for, the Gonzaga game with the UCLA Villanova was on FS1. I think the issue you had there was just that a lot of these networks are prioritizing college football because that's bigger ratings. So they're going to say, you want us to air the game, it's going to be at 10:30. And they're going, okay, we can do that. Whereas I don't know what the answer is, whether it's, try and get CBS to start earlier. CBS only has the one college football game a week in the SEC, or if you can get a better time there. But if you're taking back seats to the NBA or early regular season games or the college football, it's tough for them to overcome.
Yeah, and while we're on that topic, I also want to point out a tweet that I saw. I think it was on Saturday for the Gonzaga Alabama game. They were talking about, I think it was ESPN's NBA guy, I think it's Mike Schmidt or something, Mike Schmitz or something like that. Yeah, they were saying how they have him on every broadcast, and I noticed this as well. Every single big college basketball game, they bring him in for a couple of minutes to talk about the NBA draft profiles of, the big players or the big one and done players in those games. Personally, as a college fan, I don't care about that. And I don't want to see, the NBA draft creeping into college basketball. I want to watch college basketball. I'm personally not a big NBA fan. I don't really follow the league that much, so it doesn't really matter to me. I don't like that kind of bringing in the NBA draft, but, presenting these college games basically as just a showcase for the NBA or the NBA draft, which is, 6 months from now or 7 months from now, whenever it is. I don't like that. Let the college kids be college kids. Don't be talking about, where they're going to go in the draft and who's, number one on the big board. Let that happen in May and June, not in December and November when I'm trying to just watch a great college basketball game. That's one gripe that I have as well with the networks.
Yeah, there's no offense to Schmitz, who is a great NBA analyst a great draft analyst who does a good job of what he does. This is more, I think, an ESPN programming decision where they say, you know what, we can't sell this to the average fan unless we have NBA stakes to it, and we're big NBA rights holders. We're going to try and sell it through the NBA. I think it's the wrong way to try and sell it, because having Schmitz on there doesn't really do anything to promote the product, because when, let's say, Alabama's playing a big game in the SEC this year, and it's on ESPN2, you're going to bring Schmitz in to talk about them every game? I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know who you're appealing to. Like you mentioned, the college fans, they don't really, care about the NBA. I mean, they do, but that's not their focus, is the NBA profiles of these guys. And NBA fans probably aren't really watching college basketball right now because they're probably watching the NBA. So, like you said, it feels like a weird kind of like cross promotion, I guess I'll say. And I don't think it's necessary, and I hope that they stop it very soon.
Yeah, and it's not like a couple years ago when Duke had Zion, where everybody's like, oh, he's the next NBA superstar, and you can get the NBA fans that way. There's nobody in this class who is on the Zion level.
No, exactly. And then it feels even more artificial because it feels like you're kind of trying to, manufacture these guys into being like you said, that Zion level. I mean, Paolo Banchero and Chet Holmgren, maybe they will end up being NBA superstars, but right now they don't look like they're on the level of prospect like you mentioned that Zion was. So it just kind of feels very manufactured as well, trying to hype up these guys that they're going to be the next NBA stars when we don't know that. And it feels very fake to me.
It does. I'm going to say this to ESPN. I'm going to challenge them here. Put Schmitz on a February basketball game team, Purdue and Michigan, and tell me what NBA guys coming out of that game. And then I'll believe you actually care about it more. That whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's see that, and then we'll get talking.
Yeah. Let's also take a look here at one stat that's popped up recently. Came out MTE season with the multi events. A great week and feast week on Thanksgiving, and the stat I share with you, I think is interesting here. This initially came from Heat Check CDB on Twitter. It said college basketball MTEs begin tomorrow with the Charleston Classic and Myrtle Beach Invitational. This tweet is from November 17th. Key MTE stats on the last 12 national champions is dating back to North Carolina 09. They are 28-1 overall in MTEs. All 11 MTE participants reached their title game. 10 of the 11 won their MTE title. So this includes last year Baylor won the Jimmy V Classic over Illinois. Virginia, a couple years ago, in battle for Atlantis. Same for Nova in 18. Maui Invitational there, NIT season tip-off, Codes versus Cancer. I think it's interesting. The one exception out here is Louisville, which was the runner-up in battle for Atlantis 13. But then again, we can say it technically doesn't count because the NCAA revoked the banner for whatever it's worth. But I think it's a fascinating stat here that the last 12 national title games that feature at least one team that has either won or been to the final of an MTE.
Yeah, and it kind of like goes against everything that you would think when you say like, it takes some time for these teams to gel. How you're playing in November really is not how you're going to be playing in March. But then you look at that stat and you're like, well, maybe if you're playing good in November, you're going to be playing good in March. So it is kind of like going against what you would normally think. I guess that it speaks to, a lot of these teams are playing in these high level tournaments. They're getting this experience in November that's going to equate over to March. And it's an interesting stat. I don't think you can call it a coincidence when it's got the kind of longevity that you just mentioned. So there were definitely some interesting ones this year, and I think we might have a trend here.
Yeah, a couple of teams that we mentioned off the top here that won the titles. Obviously, I think Purdue winning the Hall of Fame tip-off, that's one you definitely keep your eye on here. Baylor dominating the battle for Atlantis is one you keep your eye on here. I guess technically Gonzaga, you want to count their thing in the whatever, like Fugazi thing they did with UCLA out in Vegas. That's one you can sort of list in there. But like, there's some interesting ones here that could keep this trend going.
Yeah. What about Wisconsin winning the Maui tournament in Las Vegas? I think that they're ranked right now. I don't think Wisconsin's going to be a national champion, but in the Big Ten, anything can happen. They look really good right now. Wisconsin, they just took down Marquette the other day, so. I'm not saying that they could win the national title, but that was an impressive week that they had in Maui or in Vegas, I guess.
Yeah, the other one I'll throw out here is an interesting team to keep an eye on because you were high on them at the start of the season here. The Florida winning the Fort Myers tip-off on the buzzer beater over Ohio State. That one was interesting.
Yeah, and they just suffered their first loss a couple of days ago to Oklahoma. But yeah, I like Florida this season as well in the SEC. I think that they can really, challenge for the number one spot in the SEC. I like their depth. I think they got a lot of guys that can be solid. Yeah, that was an incredible tournament in Fort Myers. You had the Ohio State buzzer beater over Seton Hall, and then you had the Florida buzzer beater, I think 2 days later to beat Ohio State. And then even the consolation game, Seton Hall and Cal was a really good game. I think Cal missed one at the buzzer that could have tied it or won it. So yeah, really, really good games in that kind of like an underrated tournament that Fort Myers was.
Yeah, and also throw out another one. Arizona won the Rowan Made event. They beat Michigan out there, and their team has been some early season surprise, and maybe throw them in that pile too. Yeah,
and they're a team that I feel like is going to go under the radar all season long, no matter what they do, just because they play in the Pac-12. Obviously, their games are not going to be on like we mentioned. They're not going to be on those primetime TV slots. That's more just because of the time zone that they play in. Yeah, they could kind of fly under the radar. it wouldn't shock me to see Arizona, being kind of like a trendy pick for the Final Four in a couple months.
All right, let's get to some round the horn stuff here. Let's go with the best conferences so far. What do you think are the best leagues to watch as we get close to conference play at the beginning of January?
Yeah, the best league for me, I mean, I could be biased and say the Big East, and I think that there's a case to be made for the Big East, but it's got to be the Big 12. I mean, the Big 12 right now just looks like it has, 7 or 8 teams that are going to be really, really good. Baylor is unbeaten right now. Kansas just wiped the floor with St. John's. They're a top 10 team. Texas is a top 10 team, has a big game coming up with Seton Hall. Texas Tech, I mentioned, they haven't really picked up any big wins just yet. They do have a big game coming up. But, I thought Texas Tech could be a team that could surprise some people. West Virginia's only got 1 loss. Oklahoma as well, like we mentioned, just beat Florida. And then how about Iowa State, unbeaten, ranked in the top 25, had a really impressive weekend in their MTE. So the Big 12, we've always kind of said that they have that depth. And, this year, I think you could make the case that, of the 11 teams, like, 8 or 9 of them could be, not only NCAA tournament potential, but like deep runs in the NCAA tournament. So in my opinion, I think the Big 12 is going to be really, really fun this season. I think that you have like 3 or 4 legitimate, or probably 3 legitimate national title contenders in the Big 12. And then you have a lot of teams that are going to be really, really solid. Every single game in that conference is going to be fun to watch, I think.
Yeah, I think obviously I've got to throw be a Big Ten still for a little bit, because obviously they have the favorite to win the title right now, Purdue, and they have a very deep class of teams that could at least make the second week of the tournament, whether it's Michigan, if they get themselves right, Ohio State, Michigan State, Wisconsin, teams that are sneaking into the mix here. I think that's fun. But I think the team from the league for me is the SEC, because they kind of snuck up on me, but they have 4 teams in the top 15 of the poll here, because Alabama is at 9 now after they upset Gonzaga and Seattle last week. Kentucky's at 10. Arkansas is undefeated at 12. Tennessee's at 13. Go further down the poll, you got 3 more teams. Auburn 7-1, they're 18. Florida is 6-1, they're number 20. And LSU's in the poll now for the first time. They're 8-0, they're undefeated. So I think the SEC is going to have a very, very good year this year.
Yeah, and even a team like Ole Miss, who I don't think is ranked in the SEC, they just took down Memphis the other day. I mean, it seems like they're going to be another league that's very, very deep, like you mentioned, that has, 7, 8 teams that are really, really solid teams that, any given night, you're going to get a really fun matchup in that conference. So, yeah, I agree with you. The SEC has been very impressive so far as well.
All right, let's go the other way. The worst conferences so far. Are we supposed to get a dunk on the ACC here? Because that league looks very bad.
Yeah, I don't know how you would say anything but the ACC at this point. It's been a mess for them. Duke's been good. Obviously was number 1 until a couple hours ago. They look good, but I mean, where else do you go, really? Every single team seems like it's had some head-scratching losses so far. I was pretty high on Florida State going into the season. They haven't really looked very good. Like I said, I still think UNC can be a solid team, but right now they don't look fantastic. Virginia, was ranked to start the year and just has not been good. So, there's not a whole lot to like. What do they have? 1 ranked team right now? I think that it'll come around for sure. I think that, some of these maybe struggling teams will figure it out. But yeah, right now there's not a whole lot to like in the ACC.
Yeah, you mentioned the 1 ranked team, which is Duke, which is obviously great because Duke's a national title contender, but they only have 1 other team getting votes in the poll. North Carolina got 55 votes, and nobody else in the ACC has got a vote in the top 25, which just tells you how bad the league is.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure that'll change. The league will get better as the season goes on. But yeah, right now, I mean, there's not a whole lot of juice in the ACC. There's not a whole lot of teams that are playing well, that are, impressing you in these games. In the big ACC Big Ten Challenge, a couple of those games are fun for sure. But, I don't know, like Syracuse already has 3 losses as well. Like Florida State, like I mentioned, I'm just looking at their standings right now. There's not a whole lot of teams that are really, really impressing you right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at these. I mean, Florida State, we mentioned, is a massive disappointment because Florida State was a team that I thought was going to be a sleeper team. They have lost first every big game they played, which they put them in a big hole. Do you buy Syracuse? I don't, because I don't know if they have much beyond Buddy Boeheim.
Yeah, Syracuse. Syracuse is a team to me that you just get the feeling they're going to go 19-11. They'll squeak in. They'll be like an 11 seed. They'll win their first round game. They'll play some 3 seed in the second round that looks like they've never played against the zone before, and they'll win like a 68-63 game, and then they'll be in the Sweet 16 again, because that just seems like what Syracuse does every single season. So with Syracuse, like right now, they don't look good for sure. They got a game against Villanova coming up. That's going to be fun to watch for sure. Kind of like an old Big East throwback game. But yeah, for Syracuse, I always feel like they're playing their best basketball in March.
Yeah, I mean, look at some of the other teams in that league. Louisville has a home loss to Furman on his resume, and don't get me wrong, Furman's a good team out of the SoCon, but Louisville should not be losing that game. And I'm going to dunk on Virginia again because I love to do that, and I hate the Cavalier program so much because the way they play basketball, I think, set back the sport like 50 years. But I think how you lose to Navy at home to start the season, I don't know how that is possible because Navy is not a good basketball program. I mean, they're having a good year, but they went out and they played two more ACC teams. They got smoked. They lost by 20 to Virginia Tech and 17 to Louisville. So I don't know what that tells you about Virginia. Yeah,
it seems like that system is kind of like, catching up to them a little bit. When you look at their scores, it's 67-47. They lose, they win, they score 68. They win, they score 58 here. They won against Pitt the other night in a horrible game. They score 57 points. I mean, that system's catching up. The way that college basketball is going, it's higher scoring. It's, more guys can shoot, more guys can make plays, more guys can create. Virginia just doesn't have that creativity, and when you don't have that, eventually it's going to catch up with you. Obviously, they got them a national title a couple of years ago, but, when you don't have that top level talent and when you don't have guys that can create, it's a really painful watch, first of all, and eventually it leads to some losing.
All right, let's set the number here. Over or under 4.5 ACC teams in the tournament?
Ooh, I'll go over. I think that we'll get, because Duke is a lock for sure. UNC is a lock for sure. I think Louisville can make it as well. That's 3. Syracuse will probably be in because I just think that they'll find a way in. Yeah, and then I think Virginia Tech, one of like Virginia Tech, Florida State, Miami will probably get in. One of those teams will get in. So I would say over. I think they'll get 5 in.
And Virginia, I think, is going to be in that pile too, because the league's so bad.
Yeah. So they'll get 5 in, I think.
Yeah, and Miami not do themselves like they didn't look great when they went down to the ESPN Events Invitational. They lost by 16 to Dayton. They beat North Texas by 6, and they got run out of the gym by Alabama. So that tells you everything about them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no one in the ACC has looked really, even worth our time right now besides Duke.
Yeah, let's go some not big picture thing. The biggest surprise team to you so far?
Biggest surprise team? It's got to be Iowa State. How about the way that they've played so far? Picked to be one of the lowest teams in the Big 12. Like I mentioned, speaking to the depth of the conference, now they're 17th. They beat Memphis. They beat Xavier. They won against Creighton the other night. What a team. They got Isaiah Brockington, who's really, really good. Tyrese Hunter looks like one of the best freshmen in the country. They get a new coach, and they've been really, really good so far, Iowa State. They got a big game coming up against Iowa. I think that, this is a team that we thought was going to be, like I said, probably like a single-digit win team. I think it wouldn't have been crazy to say. They go out and they're 8-0 now, and they're looking like a team that's, going to be a Sweet 16 team. So as of right now, I think it's got to be Iowa.
Yeah, I think I have 2 I'll throw out. The number 1 is USC out of the Pac-12. I mean, we all thought they were kind of taking a step back after Evan Mobley went pro, and they're undefeated. I look at the net ratings came out today on the day of recording. They're in the top 10 in net, I believe. Yeah, they are number 7 here. They're 8-0 record. They have a quad 1 win. They have quad 2 wins. So like USC and LSU. Lost all the NBA talent. Feels like Will Wade every single year is on the should he get fired list in the SEC. And like there they are again. They're in the poll for the first time. They're number 2 in the net, which is shocking to me. And like they've just like dominated their competition so far. And they got some good games coming up this week.
Yeah. And what about another team that's got a new coach and looks really well is Minnesota. I think that they're 8-0 on the season. They've been impressive as well. Another team, or they're 7-0. Another team that we thought was going to be, the bottom of that conference, and they still might. In the Big Ten, you can have an off week and go 0-3, and all of a sudden, plummet down their standings. But Minnesota's a team that we all thought was going to be, kind of like the doormat of that conference, or one of the doormats of that conference, and here they are, and they're unbeaten so far. So props to Minnesota as well.
Yeah, this week's gonna be a big week for them. They host Michigan State. They go to Michigan. We'll find out very quickly how good they are.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I was saying about,
Yeah.
that conference, you can play well, even you can have a good week and you can go 0-2 just because there's so many, good teams in the Big Ten that are tough and tough environments to play in. So, we'll learn a lot more about Minnesota by this time next week.
All right, let's go to the other. Let's go to disappointments. Who's the biggest letdown for you so far?
Yeah, to me, this one, is an obvious one. It's got to be Memphis, right? Well, there's some other ones, but Memphis is the main one to me. Uh, a team that had all this talent coming in, everyone was so high on them, ranked in the top 25. Everyone kind of forgot that Penny Hardaway isn't really a good coach, though, and that when you have all that talent, you still kind of need someone that can coach them. They've already lost a couple of games. They just don't look like a cohesive team right now, and I guess that was kind of to be expected when you build these like quote unquote super teams in college basketball with all these top 5 recruits. But when you have all that top 5 talent, you need someone to actually coach them. And I don't think Penny Hardaway is a good coach, frankly. He's throwing guys under the bus. What is he saying about the veterans don't like the new guys or whatever he was saying? I don't like that as well. That's a weird thing to do at this point in the season. So yeah, just a very disappointing start for Memphis. They got time to turn it around for sure. And I think that they will because, talent eventually will figure it out. But yeah, they've been disappointing to me.
I think for me, the biggest disappointment is Michigan because they've the team we put neck and neck with Purdue preseason in the Big Ten, and they've lost to every good team they played. Seton Hall went in there, beat them in the Chrysler Center by a bucket. We saw Arizona blow them out in Vegas. UNC blows them out on the road, and it's not a great UNC team either. And like I know Juwan Howard has a good team there, so like Michigan should be doing better than they are.
Yeah, exactly. And Michigan, I guess maybe the issue too is there is a little bit of trying to get continuity, trying to get everyone playing with each other. Because I mean we know Juwan Howard's a good coach, so there's not really questions about the coaching there. But yeah, you're right. They played three decent teams in Seton Hall, Arizona, and UNC, and they've lost to all of them. So and then 2 of them weren't really even close in Arizona and UNC. So yeah, they've got some work to do for sure. They'll figure it out, but as of right now, I think we can kind of hold the Final Four talk with Michigan.
Yeah, and for a team that's going to need to do work in the Big Ten, their best non-conference wins are Buffalo at home and San Diego State at home. They're going to have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, exactly. That resume, but the good thing about the Big Ten is basically every game is a resume game, right?
Yes.
You're playing in the Big Ten. You're going to have opportunities if you play 20 conference games. 16 of them are going to be ones that you can put on your resume. So they do have a lot of chances to figure it out.
Yeah, let's start going around the locals for a little bit here. Let's start out with Seton Hall. As you mentioned them before, they're 7-1. Week of recording, they're going to be hosting Texas in the Big East Big 12 battle, and that's going to be a fun game for Seton Hall here.
Yeah, when we spoke before the start of the season, we talked about the Big East. We kind of said it's obvious Villanova will be number 1 or the top ranked team in the conference, and then spots like 2 to 6 are really up for grabs. Well, I should have said we know that Seton Hall will be one of those top 2 or 3 teams in the conference because it just seems like Kevin Willard. The names change, the faces change. As long as he's there, they're going to continue being a team that's a top. Obviously, right now they're top 25, but they're always going to be in that top 30, top 40 range, and they're going to be around the top of the Big East. They've been really impressive so far. Their only loss so far is on that basically buzzer beater against Ohio State. They've been really, really impressive. The win against Michigan maybe looks a little bit less impressive now since what we've seen Michigan, but like you mentioned, they got a big week coming up with Texas and Rutgers, and then they play Iona after that as well. So yeah, should be a fun couple of games for Seton Hall for sure. But this is a team that I think that no matter what happens, Seton Hall is going to be in the top 4 or 5 of the Big East at worst, and they're going to be an NCAA tournament team. I just, it pains me to say as a St. John's fan, but Kevin Willard always seems to figure it out.
Yeah, they're going to be, and I love what they've done. So now that Mamu Kalis-Vili is no longer on the team, they have a very good mix there. RJ Cole, Kadari Richmond coming in, and they have a lot of good talent on that team. I like what they're doing.
Yeah, they got so much depth. They got so many guys that can beat you. They had a lot of guys come back. Like you mentioned, Mamu left, but really a lot of other guys came back. Jared Roden's been really, really good. And Kadari Richmond, I think Jim Boeheim's going to be kicking himself, although he'll never admit it, letting Kadari Richmond walk and go into Seton Hall. And I think he's going to end up being a really impact player for the Pirates for sure.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I didn't have on the rundown. I want to get to him real quick. Rutgers is back to being Rutgers. I think they're back to being a bottom of the barrel Big Ten team. This team has look at their non-league schedule. They lost at DePaul. They lost to Lafayette at home. They lost to UMass. They got blown out by Illinois. Things not looking good for Rutgers.
Yeah, would they lose by 30 to Illinois? It's been tough for them so far. That's life of the Big Ten, though, and they're looking like one of the teams that's going to be the doormat in the Big Ten, which is disappointing because I think that I thought Rutgers would be at least a tournament team this year. I don't know if they were going to go far in the tournament, but I thought that they could have a chance to at least be right around that NCAA tournament bubble. As of right now, it's not looking too good for them. They're looking like a team that's going to get kind of beat up by a lot of these Big Ten teams when you look at how they fared against Illinois on Friday night. So, as we always mention with teams in the Big Ten, there's going to be opportunities to right the ship for sure. You're going to have resume building opportunities for sure. But right now on that Rutgers resume, it's more bad than good for sure.
And speaking of resume opportunities, number 1 Purdue is coming in on Thursday night. So here you go.
Exactly. And that speaks to the Big Ten, right? Every game is, it never lets up that schedule. It's always going to be a tough game. Now, on the other hand, there's always going to be opportunities to right the ship and get a resume building win. But, if you're not playing your best basketball in the Big Ten, which Rutgers is not right now, it can kind of spiral out of control really, really quickly where you can see 5, 6, 7 losses in a row.
Yeah, let's go to UConn right now. So UConn, right in the current AP poll, is ranked 15. They've done a good job in non-league play. Their only loss was to Michigan State in a very tight game in the battle for Atlantis. They had that great double overtime win against Auburn on the day before Thanksgiving. And the thing I like with them is they just have so much depth. I mean, losing Adama Sanogo for a bit with injury hurts, but I think this team can withstand it.
Yeah. Sanogo being out for a while is definitely going to affect them. But my question with them at the start of the year, and I wasn't maybe as high as some people were, and it was, who's going to step up with James Bouknight being out, or James Bouknight, going on to the NBA, who's going to be the guy that kind of fills that role, because they didn't really have anyone to do that last year. Like you mentioned, Sanogo's been absolutely phenomenal. He's averaging 15 points a game after averaging just 7 last year. They got 4 guys averaging in double figures. RJ Cole has upped his scoring average after a little bit of a dip last year. So yeah, they got, between Cole, Sanogo, Tyler Polley, Tyrese Martin, they got a lot of guys that can beat you. So yeah, it's sort of been a team effort for sure, but Sanogo's really stepped up. Going to be out for a little bit, but yeah, they've definitely replaced James Bouknight and look like they're soaring without him.
Yeah, they absolutely have. And we're not going to do the video version today because we have some technical issues on a couple ends, but I am wearing red for your team, the St. John's Red Storm, and it's been a struggle in the non-conference play. And apart from Kansas beating them up here, they struggle against some of their non-conference opponents, whereas NJIT, you know the rest. And the net came out to they're 108, and you mentioned an interesting point on Twitter that I think there are only 7 teams in power conference leagues that didn't either play an MTE or play 4 power conference opponents in the non-conference schedule. St. John's is one of them. And we're seeing right now that scheduling is not great for them.
Yeah, exactly. And when the net comes out today, I mean, you don't want to go crazy about the net in December, but you see what happens when you don't really play a very good schedule, when you play a schedule with a lot of low major opponents on there, and then B, when you don't really look impressive against those low major opponents. St. John's has played really 3 games in a row. They played a great game against Indiana. They lose on one of the final possessions. It is what it is. It's a tough game. But then they go out and they play kind of a stinker against Fairleigh Dickinson. They almost lose against St. Francis. And then they go to overtime with NJIT, 3 straight games in a row where they just look completely out of sync and look like maybe the effort wasn't fully there. So, and when you play a rough non-conference schedule like St. John's is, where there's not a whole lot of opportunities for resume building wins, it puts a lot more extra emphasis on a game against Indiana, where, if you lose that game against Indiana and you have 4 or 5 other big, non-conference games scheduled, then you say, all right, pick yourself up and go back at it. Whereas the reaction, I think, from the fan base was a lot different because that was one of their only big chances at a resume building win. And then it put a lot of pressure on their game last week against Kansas, where, you don't want to be going into a game against Kansas saying, hey, this is a win that we really need to build our non-conference, because Kansas is really good and Kansas pulled away from them. That was a 3-point game with about 10 minutes to go. And then Kansas kind of blew the doors off of them in the final 10 minutes. So yeah, it's been a struggle for St. John's. They did get back on track the other night against Fordham, so that's impressive. But hopefully they can just finish out the non-conference schedule strong, continue to play strong, and then there's going to be opportunities in the Big East to pick up some big wins. So for now, we'll see about St. John's, but not looking great right now.
Yeah, and to recap the schedule here, I mean, looking at their upcoming games here, this week they have Monmouth coming up out of the MAC, which has been a dangerous team. They went on the road and won Cincinnati, so that's not one they can take lightly. Colgate made a tournament last year. They're playing them on Sunday, and you got Pitt, which is not really it's a power conference foe, but Pitt out of the ACC has never been good. So, like, there's not much here St. John's really do apart from add bad losses ahead of the Big East.
Exactly. That's the biggest issue now is, like, none of these games are going to go on a resume as key wins, but they can go on as bad losses. And these are all teams that, like you mentioned, are threatening. Monmouth has already won a game against Cincinnati. Colgate's beaten Syracuse. They were, like you mentioned, were an NCAA tournament team last year. And then Pitt, while they are, one of the, I would say, worst Power 5 teams in the country right now, they almost beat Virginia last week. So, Pitt's been playing, I would say, a little bit better and is at least a bit of a threat. So, there are some opportunities here for tough losses for St. John's. It's not going to be easy, but at the same time, you're not really going to build your resume very much in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, for sure. We'll put a pin in there. We'll definitely check back on them next time we talk. And we'll go wrap up the local scene here with Iona, which put itself on the map here with a big win over Alabama down at the ESPN Events Invitational. First win in program history over a top 10 school. First win in, I think, more in MAC history, because nobody in that conference really does anything against these top level teams. And they're 8-2. They're 2-0 in their league, and they have a critical stretch here of non-conference games coming up where they have Yale coming up this weekend at the Barclays Center. They have a big game against Seton Hall next weekend at MSG, and then Delaware comes to UBS Arena, where hopefully the people going to want to make parking issues the St. John's fans did. But I think with them, it's like, considering the league they play in, if they want to stay in that at-large bubble, and the Alabama thing, they'll put them in the conversation because they're 60 on the net and the first net ratings here. But the fact is they can play so many quad 3, quad 4 games that their record is going to really depend on what they do these next 3. They really can't afford to lose more than one of them.
Yeah, exactly. And you already have that win over Alabama, which is amazing for them. When you look at that at-large opportunity, if you can take down Seton Hall at the Garden in a couple of weeks in that doubleheader with St. John's and Pitt, I might add, if you can take down Seton Hall, you have 2 really impressive non-conference wins that can go on a resume that can give you a little bit extra security, because you would assume Iona is going to be, if not the top team in the MAC, then the number 2 team in the MAC. But I think it's safe to say that they will finish the MAC regular season as the number 1 seed going into the MAC tournament. If you only lose a couple of games in the MAC, let's say, 3 or 4 losses, if you go into non-conference, or if you go into the NCAA tournament and you only have, 4 or 5 losses, and you have 2 wins against Alabama and Seton Hall, all of a sudden, your at-large resume looks pretty impressive, and you have, I think, a legitimate, case to be in the NCAA tournament as an at-large team, which Iona's never had. But I think another thing too that I want to mention is, beating Alabama, beating a top 10 team, that, in my opinion, gives them, some hope that they can do this. If they do win the MAC and they end up as a 14 seed, or let's say, or something like that, they do have hope that they can take down one of these, giant teams, and then they can pull a big upset in the NCAA tournament. It doesn't seem so far-fetched anymore that we've seen them do it. Now, at that point, it would have been, 3.5 months ago that the Alabama win. But I think it gives you kind of a glimmer of hope if you're an Iona fan that, this is possible, that they can beat one of these bigger teams in the NCAA tournament in a couple of months.
Yeah, the thing that helps also is Rick Pitino took a very good non-conference schedule there where they've been playing good teams out of the league. I mean, Hofstra is probably one of the favorites in the CAA. Harvard and Yale are both favorites in the Ivy. Mm-hmm. And they have a win over Liberty down on neutral floor, I think could age nicely. It goes back to dominate their league like they usually do. And, like, if those wins keep getting better, and the fact they have Belmont and Kansas on there boosting the non-conference strength of schedule numbers even further, I think that will help them even more.
Yeah, exactly. They put together a really solid schedule, and they've hit the jackpot on that. They've played really well in that solid schedule. In my opinion, they've scheduled better than St. John's is scheduled with their non-conference, and it's paying dividends for them, because I think that it does strengthen an at-large conversation for them if they do need it in a couple of months. So credit to Pitino and credit to the Gales. They're playing really, really solid basketball. Yeah,
play the thought experiment now. Let's say they go 2-1 over the next 3 games, and they are 10-3 heading into the rest of the MAC play with 18 games. If you give them 3 losses there, that team has win 25 games in the regular season, and you're looking at potentially, like, if you manage to somehow lose in the college title game, like a 27-win team with a win over Alabama and possibly one over like Seton Hall, like that's one you would have a hard time leaving out if they don't win the league.
Exactly. I think that there's a conversation there for sure. And obviously it depends on the strength of the bubble, who they're on the bubble with. But, would you rather put in, like you mentioned, a 27-win Iona team that has, wins over Alabama and, maybe a win over Seton Hall, but for sure a win over Alabama? Or would you rather put in, a 12-loss Big Ten team or a 12-loss ACC team? That's kind of the conversation that is probably going to be had. Now, the committee probably will lean towards the power conference team, but I think that it's a legitimate conversation. I think Iona should win that conversation. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I think that they should win that conversation and at least have a real shot at an at-large bid because of how they've scheduled so far in the non-conference.
Yeah, let's go ahead. We're going to keep checking in, I think, every month or so, just until we get closer to February, and then might be a little more frequent. But let's get ready for the rest of the non-conference schedule. Like, what kind of games are you looking forward to the coming weeks?
Yeah, well, I'll start right now in this week. I mean, what a game it is on Tuesday night. I know that we're recording this on a Monday, but big time old Big East feel with Syracuse against Villanova. Like I wish they were playing that on a Monday night, so it would be like kind of like a big Monday type feel. The old Big East playing in on ESPN, but that's a game that I think is too passionate fan base. It's two old rivals. I think that'll be a really really fun game to watch between those two schools. And then my page just froze here, but yeah, looking towards the weekend, I'm interested too in UCLA against Marquette. That's a game that Marquette's with Shaka Smart has I thought been more impressive than we thought they would be so far. And it's a UCLA team that's kind of playing good basketball right now. They've only got the one loss against Gonzaga, so just in the immediate future, those are two games that kind of stand out to me.
Yeah, I'll throw out here the big Villanova-Baylor showdown on Sunday out in Waco, two top 10 teams. Villanova's played a great non-conference schedule, so I think see if they can make a statement here. I think the CBS Sports Classic on the 18th, which Saturday before Christmas, by the way, if you're a college basketball fan, get your shopping done, sit down and watch the basketball all day because there's a ton of great games that day, and you have a great doubleheader there. I mean, I'll throw that 18th day out here. Here's what we have so far. Tennessee, Memphis, Gonzaga, Texas Tech, the Iona Seton Hall game we mentioned before, CBS Sports Classic, UCLA, North Carolina, Ohio State, Kentucky is in there. And I mean, the list goes on. There's a lot of great action that day.
Yeah, that, like you mentioned, that's a day that you don't want to be doing Christmas shopping. You don't want to be standing in lines, waiting to check out in a store, holding a million bags. Get it done, or do your Christmas shopping online, or have it done beforehand. And sit down and watch some college basketball all day and night. And don't be wasting your time doing holiday shopping.
Yeah, for sure. Troy, thanks all the time. Really appreciate it. Before I let you go, I'll be a follow social media. Keep up with the Seeing Red podcast.
Definitely. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Troy Mauriello. That's Mauriello. Yeah, I do the Seeing Red podcast, cover St. John's basketball, so you can check that out. We do a new episode every single week. We'll have one coming out later this week when the Red Storm take on Monmouth. So definitely check that out. And Mike, it's always a pleasure coming on.
It is always a pleasure, Troy. Thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it.
All right.